So welcome everyone to our third talk of our Design++ seminar series. Today I'm very happy and excited to introduce Dr. Paula Strunden, who is actually joining us from Weimar, for the Bauhaus University in Weimar. And today she will give us a talk titled Modeling the Unseen, the Future of Spatial Experiences in Extended Reality. So as I said, currently she holds a guest professorship at Bauhaus University. She is a transdisciplinary artist with a background in architecture. The exciting news is that she will join us in September. So she will join us here at the ETH. She has submitted an application for an ETH Postdoc Fellowship, and together with, she will join the whole Design++ network under the supervision of Professor Gramazio and Gramazio Research Group. Just a little introduction. So as an architect, Paula worked at Herzog de Meuron and Raumlabor in Berlin. And she was able actually to transfer her knowledge of architectural understanding as a practicing architect into her research and her PhD, through which actually she developed very immersive extended reality experiences through sort of multimodal interactivity and sort of based on how we perceive architectural spaces and sort of come up with very interesting and very innovative way of understanding and how we understand how we perceive architectural spaces. She won, for her research, she won the Best Research Award in 2023 at the Academy of the Arts in Vienna. And she was also twice nominated for the Dutch Film Award, the Golden Calf. And among other acclaimed events, she also exhibited her work at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, the Film Museum in Amsterdam, the Ars Electronica in Linz, the Museum for the Modern Salzburg, and so on. I'm probably not going to take any longer, so please, without further ado, help me warmly welcome Paula here with us, and I'll just give you the word. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Fabio. Thank you very much, Fabio, again. I'm super excited to be here and especially to be coming here in September and to be working here for 2 years. So my talk today is entitled Modeling the Unseen, the Future of Spatial Experience in Extended Reality. And as Fabio just kindly introduced me, I'm a transdisciplinary artist and design-based researcher. And what I'd like to present to you today is basically the core of my practice that is, as you can see here, very hands-on, very, climbing on chairs, like plugging computers in and out and actually doing everything hands-on. The majority of the work that I'll be introducing to you today was developed during my PhD research that was part of a European research network called TAC, Communities of Tacit Knowledge, Architecture and its Ways of Knowing. And I was affiliated with the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and working also a lot with Architectural Institute. So in my case, with the New Institute in Rotterdam, but ETH Zurich was also part of the network. So it was a bit of a circus throughout the last years. And I'd like to give you, an idea or glimpse of what that was like and what I'd like to do then here. So basically, I will speak for half an hour about exploring virtual technologies from an embodied spatial perspective through the lens of an artistic researcher. And I'm looking forward to your questions afterwards. And I'd like to dive right in or start with a little anecdote. So this is a picture of one of my exhibitions, and you can see some WhatsApp messages on the left and on the right. And basically what you can see here is 2 people immersed in one of the VR installations that I've built with these inflatable wearables and interacting with each other in the virtual world. And then I got these WhatsApp messages of people observing them saying, oh, we had this cutest couple. It was so exciting to watch them in there. And then like a few weeks later, friends of that couple came back and were like telling like the museum like invigilator all about it, saying that like basically this man arranged the whole day for her and they loved the experience so much and then told that they found each other in my VR world. and after that also in real life, and now they're totally in love. So cute, 2 exclamation marks. And I also thought it is so cute, and why I would like to share that with you is to kind of, open my talk with this question: why is there so much fuss about virtual worlds not being real when we can experience genuine emotions and sensations within them? So it's sensations like love, fear, certain anxiety, but also being impressed, being in awe of spatial environments are, of course, very real sensations. So I divided the talk into 2 parts. So I would like to speak a bit about the history of extended reality and how I approach the technology, and then speaking more about my practical hands-on work under the title Modeling the Unseen. Before I go into the history, just very, very quickly, what is extended reality? So I'm assuming that you're aware of it, like you're working with it, but it never hurts with all these terms around. So extended reality usually is being used as an umbrella term to summarize virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. And I use it because I do not like this focus on the device and on the technology. So to move a bit back of saying, okay, it's very important that we have this device or we use this amount of, pixel to experience this world. But I write X with lowercase, so the focus is on the experience of reality. It's a mediated experience, so we work with certain devices, but the focus is not on the type of goggles that we're using. So this is an approach that also goes back to the 90s. So you see here Paul Milgram, a taxonomy of mixed reality visual displays that some of you might know from 1994. And what's very important about this reality-virtuality continuum is that it shows that we do not have to understand the virtual as like these oppositions, or that we see like the real on the one hand and the virtual on the other hand, but that we understand it much more as a gradient or as a spectrum and any kind of experience that can be mediated in between. So I'm personally very interested in these, these thresholds or these in-between spaces that develop between the physical and the virtual, and especially where the two converge. So like the space that we can create when we experience both, or kind of the paradox of the virtual and the real at the same time. So moving into the history, I think, what's very important and what's often being forgotten, that actually in the same year that the first kind of the mother of all invention, like Douglas Engelbart sitting in front of the screen, keyboard, mouse interface was presented in 1968. In the same year, the first head-mounted display was also shown by Evan Sutherland. It's called the Sword of Damocles because the weight was so heavy the person could have died wearing it below it. But what's really important about the juxtaposition of these 2 images is that what we see here on the right versus the left is that it turns the body into the input device, and consequently like the whole space around it into a potential interface. So this makes virtual technologies an embodied spatial form of computing, which I think is very important to keep in the back of our heads. And then when we look further into the history and when we look at all these black and white images of all the people, computer scientists, engineers, who have developed who have been working on the medium, we find many pictures of male figures. They're being dubbed the grandfather of VR, like Morten Heilig, or the father of VR, like Evan Sutherland. There's like Jaron Lanier, the godfather of VR. But what's actually being forgotten, that a lot of the content that has been developed, so a lot of the work that were actually, that came out by using these devices or thinking of how we can actually use these devices, was done by female practitioners from various fields, and a lot in the early 1990s. The time, of course, is too short to kind of go into all of them, but I would just like to point out one example, which is Shah Davis, a work from the 1994, which is called Osmosis. So here you see a person wearing like a wearable backpack that measures the extension of its chest. So when you breathe in, of course, like it widens a bit, and when you breathe out, like it will subtract. And this quite simple kind of mechanics is being translated into a navigational way of floating through this virtual space by breathing. So when you will breathe in, you will lift up. When you will breathe out, you will descend and you will go down in the world. So this, dehabituation of the senses is very core and has been very inspirational also for my work. And there's a lot of, examples like this actually from 20, 30 years ago. I'd like to share a quote by Brenda Laurel, who says in 2018, "What frustrates me most is that we learn some shit that some people aren't paying attention to. Today's practitioners are probably not even aware of what was built in the early 90s, mostly by women." So there's quite a big of a lack of knowledge surrounding these work that were developed in the early 90s. And this frustration by Brenda Laurel is also being echoed by Jacqueline Ford-Maury, another VR researcher who has written her PhD researching or doing an in-depth survey where she tried to find artistic, meaningful, very creative virtual reality experiences, saying that of the 100 creations that she found between 1985 and 2006-07, 70% of those creators were women. So as part of my PhD research, I spent quite a lot of time researching, okay, who were these people? I was interviewing them, so there's quite a breadth of oral history also. I think what's very interesting is that it's quite an interdisciplinary network, still a very small community. I think we also see here at ETH, we keep on bumping into each other, the people interested working with these things. But I think there's a lot of knowledge to build upon and to learn from that time. And I developed an participatory open source platform called www.xr-atlas.org. So this is a website anybody can access, and basically the idea is to really extend the understanding that we have of XR and to extend it geographically, of course, to say, okay, where are the main works, but also very importantly, chronologically, to not say, okay, this is a new invention by Meta or whoever. It's actually a phenomena that, especially in the arts and architecture, has been around forever, I'd say. So basically, this overview goes from, Renaissance frescoes to sci-fi books, and in order to really show that, it is a kind of interdisciplinary effort to understand that medium. And I'd like to just show you one little video to finish this historical part, to give you a bit an impression of the style of content that you can find on that repository. And of course, anybody can also submit work. So this is the idea of this platform.
The computers are coming, as we've seen this week, to affect most areas of our lives. What's it to be? Man or machine? Behold, the human and the computer. This dance to technology by a living, breathing human, and the electronic dancer drawn with eerie skill by a person using a computer, in perfect step. But in real life, we are not yet perfectly attuned, humans and machines, and so the dance continues. Rebecca Allen, the artist who animated that dancing figure, thinks computers are too important to be left solely to scientists.
You need to have people, from psychology and education and art and music able to work on these machines and help define the machine's personality.
Yeah, so I'd just like to leave you with this 40-year-old quote about defining the machine's personality, which is, of course, a very big question nowadays, given the recent accelerating developments with AI. And so much about the very short introduction to the history of XR. I'd like to spend the rest speaking about my applied research and work. And in order to do so, I'd like to ask you to please close your eyes. So start by feeling your hands. Take one hand into the other. Let them touch each other. Now slowly lower your hands and let them rest on the top of your legs. What is the surface that you feel below your fingers? Which of your fingertips do you need to move to find out? Now slowly move your hands further back to the chair that you're sitting on. How does it feel? What is it made of? What kind of texture does it have? Is it hard? Is it warm or cold? How does it sound when you tap it? Softly. What is below you? What is the surface like beneath your feet? Is there a wall behind you? Or window to your side? What do you hear now? If you imagine that the things that your body touches, those things that meet your hands, those that your feet feel, those things that your legs rest on, and those that your ears hear. If you imagine that their surfaces are merely a fragment of a world only you can perceive, what would that world be like? What can you see with your inner eye? Where are you now? So please open your eyes. So I've done this little mini meditation with you to introduce to you my main research topic, which is this relationship between our physical bodies, like the material objects that we interact with, and the virtual spaces these interactions trigger, and how these again guide our bodies to move and to perform in a certain way. So this is based on the hypothesis that when we interact with the virtual physically, so through our sense of touch, by tasting, by licking, by smelling that virtual space, that we can actually reveal information about it that we would not otherwise be able to perceive. And the way how I do that is I work with VR headsets and then physical objects that are being tracked, so they're both present in the physical as well as in the virtual world, and then there's a lot of information that like their material properties can actually convey. So for example, this is about an experience where you're gardening together with another person, and there's the weight of this like watering can, or like the texture of the wood, or like the smell of the wood, the actual handling that the can affords. Like all of that actually informs the virtual experience. And this goes back to an understanding that, of course, speaking to an architectural audience, like we all take this for granted, we know that, but I think often within that realm of XR design, it's being forgotten that spatial perception is inherently multisensory. That means that, we move through space, we perceive it through the multimodality of all our senses, and they co-contribute to our perception of reality. And what's very exciting about working with XR is that we can actually go beyond these like 5 classical senses. So instead of just exploring touch, taste, smell, sound, and sight, apparently there are up to 44 senses, I guess. I don't know. There's probably like a 45th sense just being discovered at ETH. It's not about the actual amount. It's just to say that they are sensorial perception, like our sense of illumination, or our sense of gravity, our sense of balance, our sense, chronoception, our sense of time, that can all be explored when doing these experiences. And the way how that looks then like, so before I started the PhD, I've been building these installations that combine like, the physical movement of the person being immersed with interaction with objects, so moving from one object to the other, and unlocking these spatial narratives by kind of, performing these installations. And so it is somewhere between media arts, scenography, but of course architecture plays a very important role, and then usually exhibited in museums or galleries or an artistic context. And then as part of the PhD research, I basically turned these installations into like a methodology, calling them models, which was very important, performative extended reality models, and then developing one installation for each of these parts, so kind of the idea of the body, the object, and the space, and seeing what we can find out by comparing them. As I just said, like the aspect of the model is very key, I think. So all the things that you will see as the examples of this installation now really go back to the idea that we can create models of reality that are not representational models or kind of iterative ad hoc sketch models, but that are actual autonomous models, which is a term by Thea Brajic and Lawrence Wallen, saying that the model itself can create its own reality. And so what I'd like to present to you now is basically some like making of and impressions of these three extended reality models that are developed throughout the PhD. So starting with the object, the Infra-thin Magick and XR ceremony, that is the one that Fabio also experienced, that was here at ETH exhibited. What is this installation is about basically a term by Marcel Duchamp called the inframince. So he came up with this term describing that there are some things that we can all experience, we all know, but we have no words for, like the seed that has just been left behind, the temperature of that seed, or the thickness of a shadow when a person steps behind us, or how the breath smells differently after a person has been smoking. So these examples are being taken and translated into the realm of extended reality. So basically, I set out to design instruments or tools that allow you to experience this infra-thin space between the physical and the virtual. And this was influenced a lot also by magical and like chemical processes and practices from the past. So this idea to really approach this technology also in a historical way, thinking more about ritual and designing it really as a ceremony was very important. And then it was basically, like designing a form of narrative that allowed you to unlock these models by interacting with them. And you see here, like on the left, for example, a person like lying down, here like a person handling an object. So like the change in the body position defines the course of the narrative. And then you see here on this screen, so basically the moment the person lay down on this like donut-like cushion, the space around it exploded and you started sinking into this like 40-meter deep well being taken to that space that laid below that other space. It is extremely difficult to describe like first-person embodied experiences, but I think this is just an attempt to bring you closer also the different media that fly into kind of creating these experiences. So here you see the actual architecture that constitutes these experiences. So this is like this tower that you go through and where you end into this platform at the ground. So this is kind of the quite surreal, dreamlike, and also visually very toned down. So kind of like black and white world that you're being taken into. And then something that I developed throughout the work with these installations is the role of the guidance that plays a very important role. So you can see here the ceremony mistress that is actually supervising the experience. So often, of course, also in like a museum setting, you're being asked to put on a headset, you're kind of being left alone a little bit. So the onboarding and the offboarding process goes a bit into the background. And I basically create experiences that really center around the presence of that other person and how they guide you throughout your own experience. So you basically drop in and out of the experience that you're having and you keep on meeting that mistress. They have a voice. In that case, they're present as a raven, but they also feed you, they help you, they stay around you. So you get to kind of constantly, a bit like this first diagram I showed you, dip in and out of these different realms and experience this kind of paradox of being in between. And in the end, what is so important about what you see here in this kind of performative sequence that this creates is that it creates also an architecture where it is very important how we take care of each other. Trust plays a huge role, so in your ability to actually trusting that environment, trusting that person, and letting go, and also to emphasize with the objects and the world that you encounter. So every individual that goes in has a very different experience depending on also their ability to kind of go with these three terms. The second of the three installations I'd like to share with you is Alison's room. So this is an extended reality archive looking more into spatial perception and the overlaying of different spatial configurations. And here you see again, we have a little like guiding animal, which is, this little dog cat thing in the physical world. In the virtual world is a beautiful black cat called Serafina, who speaks to you and guides you also through this experience. And this is basically a reconstruction of a British post-war architect called Alison Smithson. So you might be familiar with Alison and Peter Smithson. And it was after they died, this office space of hers, which was a bit like a room of one's own that was left behind, and that doesn't exist as such anymore, and that I allowed people to re-access and to learn about their work. So I'll show you a short trailer.
I'm glad you could make it today. I am Serafina, and I will guide you to the XR archive. As you requested, I have activated for you Alison Smithson's private working room with archive. File number GR7009, Cato Lodge. Depending on how you move through the space, where and for how long you stay, and which of the red elements you choose to touch, a different narrative will unfold, and different fragments of Alison and Peter's work life will be revealed to you. Ah, that's the little Garden of Paradise painting. Come, follow me through the chimney. I think we can walk inside of it. What are you doing? The sounds you make seem to be constructing the memory of the house of the future.
Yeah, so people develop quite a strong bond to Serafina, or in case of Infra-thin Magick, to the raven. So, of course, this is just to show you a bit the process. Like, it's my studio in Amsterdam. Like, Serafina used to be a little skateboard with a pillow strapped around it. So I think the whole, very iterative, testing process is super important for these installations, and why I'm also so excited to be here at ETH and to be working at the IDL. So I think this whole idea of, building things in one-to-one and allowing people to test them is very key, whereas as you can see here and also in the trailer and also at the example of the other work, the the visual really drops into the background. So it's often quite a desaturated black and white world where the focus is on the, the tactile and the sometimes, taste and smells and the other sensory modalities. And I won't go too much into detail, but of course, a majority of the design work for these installations consists in creating these spatial narratives. It's a bit of a puzzle, quite classical architectural work with tracing paper to see how all these different, in case of Alison's room, I think it's 7 different rooms, overlaying so that you don't bump into anything, but you actually get to freely move and have this feeling of, going through this infinite spatial labyrinth. And then, as you've seen also in the trailer, so I always work with hand tracking, so you have your own real hands, so you can touch and interact with things, and wherever you go, whatever you touch, whatever you interact with, then basically triggers the space to change and results on animations that actually invite you to move again in a different way. And then, as you can see here, so people are very active, so they are crawling and lying and touching and petting, and this is very important for each of these works, is really to to allow people to experience firsthand these environments, and then in the end, everybody experiences them in a very different way. So everybody spends different amount of time in it. Also, people see different things. Sometimes they tell me about things that I've been seeing that I never knew I designed. So I think this is a very beautiful realization, of course, of how much we also, we come with our own memories, our own aspirations and ideas, and fill these spaces with our ideas of what they become or could become. It's actually a very important part of the work as well. So this dance a little bit, you can already see here, different invigilators guiding the people. And it becomes a bit of course, observing them, a little bit the dance around each other. inspired me to do the last and third case study of the PhD that I'd like to show to you, which is called Rhetorical Bodies, an XR dance performance. And here you really have two people dancing, moving around each other, and there's no objects or kind of spatial installation. It's a very abstract environment. Also, their bodies are being translated into these very abstract, fluid, blob-like shapes. So you're a bit like a lava lamp. And the experience consists of meeting that other person, finding that other person, in the extreme falling in love with that other person. I didn't anticipate that. But to really, basically dance around each other. And each of these variables is connected to a different sound. So you become a bit like an embodied synthesizer. So depending on like the velocity in which you move your limbs, you change the pitch and the volume of the sound. So you really perceive your body, or like, your limbs, or like senses like proprioception or kinesthesia is translated into sound, which is very strange, because usually you don't hear your body moving, or you don't hear like another person approaching you or moving towards you. So this is basically what kind of dehabituate the senses in this installation. And then this is just one thing I wanted to share, is that all of these installations are of course also developed throughout like a process that is working a lot with students. So there's a lot often like workshops or summer schools in order to do user testing and to try certain ideas. So this is something that I'd also be very interested in doing here, is basically just exploring quite like open-ended experimentally. Like this is part of a summer school I did in Berlin together with combining dance, art and architecture students. So I think especially also by doing these like interdisciplinary dialogue and like combining the knowledge that different people have, there's so much to find about how we use our bodies, how we perceive that virtual space. And what happened there is that in the end, the result was a VR experience where there was no headset anymore, but like they shared they shared one body through these sound sources, having to really move in a swarm-like, incredibly attentive way, because if somebody might visually move in an unpleasant way, it's not so disturbing. But if you have a sound in the space that is, I don't know, like they became extremely sensible and attentive to each other and really started moving in a way that was, very unexpected and beautiful to watch. So this idea of creating, collective or distributed bodies is also something that's very much at the core of the work. So how we can use it as a tool to communicate and share, maybe in non-visual, non-verbal ways. And then just to finish, so basically there's a lot of reflection coming out of all these experiences. Like there's a lot of insights being gathered by how people actually, what they see, what they hear, what they think they learn through it. What I'm very interested in is to continuing also in the time being here, how we can use this tool, so this extended reality model, as a tool to actually combine different disciplines and facilitate a dialogue through these embodied experiences at the core. So by having a similar or a comparable experience to actually start a dialogue that is maybe not so coming directly out of the discipline, but actually coming out of that shared experience and going from there. And this is just like a few quotes I wanted to share with you. So this triangulation of like combining this like body object space, like how do people describe the actual spatial experience that they have, for example, as a deep sense of connection, an invisible pact between all involved, a symbiotic relationship where my action influenced the virtual space, the opening of a space within or below my mind, two distinct kind of spaces, also they kind of interweave, one that opened my mind and one that opened my body, or a space that I did not know exist, but now never want to miss. So these are just like, a few of the quotes as people described, but as I showed you in the beginning, this idea to question, like, what is the space that actually unfolds when we are between these realms? And what I find very interesting and what I'm excited to explore while being here is how actually, so like kind of current like cognitive frameworks describe our perception or like, our cognition actually as being embodied, so kind of, guided by our bodily movements, as being enacted, so by the actual, like, the enactments or the actions that we take in relation to objects, embedded, of course, which is very important, like how we are like culturally, socially embedded within which context. Then there is the fourth, the extended, which I think is very interesting also now in regards to AI tools, but also of course to XR, how we can outsource certain part of our cognition actually not only to other people, but also potentially to object or other sources of knowledge. And what I'd like to propose that there's a fifth E, which is the enveloped, so that there's like a spatio-temporal kind of element or configuration that actually has a very big impact on how we memorize, how we think, how we understand like reality in the first place. And that is very interesting to explore through these extended reality models. So the outlook is, I'm currently working really on like exploring, okay, how can we make tangible like this sensation of like being enveloped like in a space that is kind of defined by physical laws on Earth, and how can we question that or dehabituate our understanding of that. And one is like the powers of being 1 and 0, which is based on the film of Charles and Ray Eames, The Powers of 10. And the other work, Mirrorworlds, Imagine a World of Us All, is what I'm very excited to be exploring here throughout the next 2 years. And it's built on the concept of really inhabiting like an AI XR generated environment. So instead of prompting text or images, to really prompt space in real time. So kind of walking through a life, become dream, and actually act with other people within it. So it is about exploring this idea of the extended reality model and exploring an architecture that is driven by the idea of real-time, full-size, in-person, first-hand, and on-site. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Paula. This was absolutely inspiring. Very, very beautiful presentation. Before we go to the Q&A, just to make a little comment. Unfortunately, Paula cannot stay with us for the Apollo session due to prior commitments. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand now, or you will be silenced forever. No, I'm kidding. But unfortunately, we don't have a more informal approach by the Apollo. So this is, take your chance now to ask any questions if you have any. Maybe I just break the ice a little bit just to make a little comment. I think very fascinating. I think throughout the presentation there was a bit of a shift. So the work started as a single person wearing a VR headset, very sort of a single player type of modality where the person is very isolated in a virtual world and experiences sort of an architectural space which is somehow very predefined. But somehow in your work shifted towards the end where becomes multiplayer, where there is no more headset and people start to kind of interact with sort of sound sources which are very abstract and so on. Do you think, are we too far off? So what caused that shift in a sense? And do you think, are we too far off to have a extended reality experiences, a multiplayer extended reality experiences that we can all experience in the same way, sort of a virtual world that we can all experience together at the same time? I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that happens throughout the process. I think by also becoming more confident and trusting the different agents, or like the different variables of creating this more and more, and also letting them speak, or like letting them do what they do without having to control it too much. I think this, this is how it happened a bit, and I do think this is where I think what makes it so exciting. I mean, in the end, like we are all constantly, I mean, all of us are in our little thought world, or like, I mean, you're all somewhere with your thoughts now. I mean, of course, we physically sit here, but we are constantly in our own kind of, immersive world. So I think it is something that it's very natural to us, or like we're very used to this. And I think these are just ways to actually, extend certain things to the outside and to make them, to use them to communicate in a different way. But I think it's not so much to add on it, but rather I think also this urge to always reduce more. It's more to actually realize how much our body is constantly constructing our reality, and like by taking things from the outside away, it helped me to understand better how we actually do it. So I think, I mean, it is too difficult in this short amount of time to go into details, but just one example, like, for example, in Infra-thin Magick, you have this object that you can like hold between your hands, and when you touch it, your eyes move within that vessel. So basically, you're controlling your vision by moving your hands. So this is something that we've never done physically. Like, I mean, we're not able to hold our hands and kind of, or I'm not able. So what happens is the space starts turning around us because our vision is separated from our gravitational sense, or sense of balance. So in that moment, you realize, okay, I'm basically just stabilizing this environment constantly, and it's just one way of how I've learned to do it, but there's so many other ways of experiencing space, can be much more dynamic, can be much more fluid. And I think, the less we have to kind of fight or like have to make our brain work with external stimuli, the more we can actually try to focus on understanding the brain, or like our mind kind of constructing it.
Yeah, thank you.
I realize that maybe I'm the only one here that experienced your work. I don't know if this is true. No? Who else? You? Okay, we are two. But it's, this brought me to the, reflection, accessibility in your work. And this is an issue for artists. There are complex phenomena like space, real physical space. We as architects, I often realize when I'm lecturing, I'm showing buildings with pictures and how poor, this medium is, even if you show videos, even if they are well conceived, it's 10% of the experience. And in your case with, this medium and XR, this is even more crazy. And I think you did a very good job in asking us to close the eyes. So to start to feel how, this sharpening of senses can happen. But I would still say what I have experienced in your installation over there, this was a thing I would never assumed.
Yeah.
I was interested. Daniela booked me the thing, and then I was really into it. And the question is, because you then make the whole thing more complex. It's not just the technology. You need the objects, and then you need the mediators, this person. This is all part of your art. How can this scalable? Do you see some, or is this wishable? That as an artist, probably it's not even the point, But this tension between the talking about it and giving a glimpse, and then having people actually experience it. Is it an issue for you?
I mean, it is an issue as long as there's nobody in the audience who has experienced it. So now I'm lucky that you have, and people trust your opinion. But I think, of course, it is a huge issue that, embodied immersive experiences are, or especially transformative experiences, are impossible to communicate or to share when not having had them. And I think as an artist, I gravitate a bit in between thinking, okay, it's like theater. It's being played once, there's an audience, it's real time. So you have been there, you haven't. I also have gotten rid of installations, like, for example, Microtopia has been experienced by a bit over 1,000 people and doesn't exist anymore. So there's no way to go back to it. And I think it has there's a certain beauty to it, because of course in the memories of people they exist, and they still exist. Also, people are very able to memorize them, very similar to architectural environments and as actual existing spaces, and to speak about them if they have experienced it firsthand. And so I think this idea of I like that it has a certain time, it has a certain amount of people who have been inside and experienced it. But of course, I think for research purposes, and also as architectural designer, is a very big question. I think that's also where the educational work comes in a lot. So I think I spend a lot of time skilling up people to create comparable experiences, or also building, we're discussing today also like building certain forms of like assets or tool sets, because I think in the end, it is not about that one specific experience. It's more about like having certain forms of embodied immersive experiences that dehabituate your senses in a way. But I think also having spoken to people like Shar Davis about Osmoso, who created this work 40 years ago, we could have a conversation that was very attuned, speaking about very similar things. So I see a bit the scalability in creating more people being interested in working with this technology. So people creating these extended reality models for their own purpose or their own field of research. So I do not think it is, it's a must that one experiences the exact same thing, but I think it is a very interesting tool as architectural or designers or artistic researchers to work with,
I just wanted to know when I can see the next setup and where.
Pre-order. I think the next, I'm working now with the Apple Vision Pro on an experience for the Munch Museum in Oslo, also with like a 4D sound system in October. And then afterwards, I hope here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. I have less of a question, more maybe a comment and an invitation. I would very much welcome your presentation because you give a very nice, also historical introduction, and you link between the arts, architecture, a lot of technology, but also the humanities and the social sciences, right? So in one of the clips, there was this nice thing about there should be psychologists and educators and people like this. I'm a psychologist by training. I run the cognitive science chair in the humanities and social sciences department. And I see a lot of this XR topics coming in from different perspectives, right? So we now have active collaboration with the Art University, and I would very much welcome or invite you to interact with people in our team and our department across this, Fabio, you as well, because there's a very technical view on this, right? And this is what I expected when I came here, something techie. It's very nice to see something that is humanities-driven and talks about transformative experiences, talks about 4E cognition as if everybody knew what 4E cognition is. So super interesting, very happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm happy that you are here. It was actually part of the research proposal also for the postdoc that we do a symposium based on first-hand shared experiences to invite people like you and to do like more interdisciplinary dialogues in the IDL. So I'm looking forward to connecting and doing that,
Hi, nice to see you again. Nice to hear and see how your work developed since we last met. I think back then you were really at the beginning of the PhD, and I was also doing that XR installation in Out, and I remember that we were talking about how difficult it is to evaluate these things, like when you're working in between art and architecture, and you're also in this liminal space of real reality and virtual reality. And I was wondering throughout the rest of the research and the installations, how did this evaluation of your own work versus the user experience, right? All these people that, like you said, had all these personal experiences, very subjective, very different from one another. How did you deal with it throughout the process, individually and also in between the three? And actually, how did you end up wrapping it up with the PhD?
I think what was a very important part was writing the methodology chapter that I try to push very far away always. But I think this realization that, one as the person, I think especially as like an artistic, as an artist, I think anybody, that one is like one very small part within a much larger constellation of things, and also like each of these installations is just one example of something bigger one is trying to do. And I think to kind of take a bit that weight out of individual roles, objects, but like to just try to see it a bit in a bigger picture. And to me, it helped a lot to have very I mean, of course, there's like this user evaluation, like they were always doing written reports and also interviews, but I think especially the conversation with people involved in the making process and also in the performative process. So I would, for example, like, William Shapley, he was the person who was guiding people here at ETH through Infra-thin Magick, and afterwards I would have like a 1.5 hour conversation with him, recorded, analyzed, kind of semi-structured interview, understanding what is his knowledge now from having had this position of guiding, I don't know, 60, 70 people through it. What has he learned from it? And the same, what is the perspective of the sound designer having like, developed sound that is being controlled through the velocity of the immersion and changing the pitch? Or I think also with the coders that I worked, so the conversation with them. So in the analysis of the case studies, their position, their understanding is a lot, I think like it's a bit in the, and I think that's where this interdisciplinary approach comes in, like it's somewhat like the knowledge or like the things found sit at these fringes, or like where somebody who comes from a very different fields actually realizes that, okay, that's something that's maybe worth following up on, and then having the conversations about that. And I think this is also why, like, thanks to the comment of the psychologist in the room, like, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. But I think like, so I think this is where it becomes very interesting, where we actually are able to question like people outside of the making process or the experience. And to a certain extent, we can question people, but of course, you also question the sites, you question the materials you work with, like the objects you design, but to give them, as much agency as possible. That helps.
Can we have one more question? And I think there was someone else here. This is the last question.
Hello, thanks for the great talk. So you talk a lot about the spatial perception with humans as a research subject. So my research is more about spatial perception ability of machines or robotics. In other words, I want to enable machines to have similar spatial perception ability with humans. For example, we want to machines to recognize where is a chair and what is physical properties like affordance or materials to in turn assistant humans or to assistant the interaction for a user experience. My question is, what insights do you think your research can share or transfer to study the spatial perception of machines?
It's a very big question. But I think, I mean, I personally am very interested in this idea that, we perceive our environment or reality through internal models that, they're grown over like all our experiences, and that, I mean, our brains also, I mean, they're not machines, but they also try to like save energy all the time and do like the most efficient and the most kind of productive thing of like constituting what we're experiencing as reality. And I think within that, we are always just meeting kind of what we expect reality to be, or like what we anticipate or like desire it to be. And I think to research that space, kind of like where that is and like how much we actually think we know and what actually changes, or how we calibrate that to what actually happens, I think that is very helpful, because in the end you try the machine to also have that kind of breadth of knowledge, I'm assuming, but it's really not at all my expertise.
Yes, I think my scenario is more on augmented reality, not virtual reality. I think in VR you can preset all the environments. But in AI, I think the environment should be adjusted based on user interaction.
Yeah, this is maybe another conversation.
Thank you.
But I think it's, I personally don't believe that it matters so much, like whether you have the AR or the VR goggles, but I think the spatial perception is not, it's an act, and we constantly act it out, and it constantly changes. It's a super dynamic thing, like it changes through every experience we make. And I think this is maybe also, yeah, to start not understanding it as something passive, that there's one way to do it. It's different for every person, it's different for every day, it changes, like every book we read, like film we watch, actually changes how we perceive spatial environments. Yeah.
So maybe a question. From the hardware and the software side, what do you feel the greatest limitations and the ones you would hope to find somebody to challenge with when you come to ETH in September?
The weight of the headset. I think they're so, I mean, it's basically the everyday activity consists of challenges, and it's like, it's such a fight working with this technology and like building for it. I don't even know if there's like one specific thing. But I think it's, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with like the intuitiveness. I think like I mean, yeah, make a joke, like the weight of the headset, but I think this whole thing of like, yeah, that it is a helmet, that you have these controllers, I think like the way how this interface has this clunkiness, heaviness, kind of, yeah, like most people like still haven't had an experience, are also very reluctant to have an experience because of that. So I think to find ways, I mean, today when we were at the IDL also for like these sound demos, like we were using the projection surfers without having to wear a headset, and we're discussing like possibilities with the OptiTrack system to like use your body, but like having not to wear a headset. So I think I'm generally very interested in, yeah, body tracking or like movement tracking, but I think this head-mounted display and the way how it is designed and how it works is kind of, yeah, it's its own limitation. And I think there to find ways that are, yeah, that allow a bit, like also going back to the first question from Fabio, that allow more people to have a shared experience without having to kind of go through this threshold. I think that would be very interesting to explore in that space. Yeah, it is a bit like a theater, like you almost, you want like several people to experience something together, and I think this togetherness or shared experience is still very much of a question. Yeah.
Thanks. You tell me if we can ask more questions, or if we're about to.
Yeah, I don't know what time it is.
6:35.
Yeah, I think it's okay. If
there's any more questions?
Hey. So, I mean, obviously we only got basically the visual side of things, so I'm going to ask about the imagery you're using. There's sort of this spectrum almost from abstract to surreal to, I don't know how much you go into, more realism in your imagery. And then I'm also seeing like sort of illusions, which are getting back to more surreal imagery, and then quite a few objects that have quite a bit of symbolism. And I want to ask how that impacts sort of immersion or whatever your goal maybe might be with these projects, and how you navigate this imagery.
I think for like the 3 case studies you saw, because they were developed as part of the PhD, the aim was of course to show a variety or like a diversity in possibilities. I think, I believe like the core is really consistency. I think like it does not matter too much whether you decide to create a drawn experience, or like if it must be photorealistic experience, or everything is like black and white. Or I think it's much more important that the way how you interact with that environment, that you understand the rules as intuitively as possible, like as quickly as possible, and then you stick to that, like that there's a consistency. You're a bit like a child in that world, learning to act within it. So I think, you know, like how kids, like, I mean, would take this and throw it to the ground, like as many times as they understand exactly how it operates. So I think people going inside these XR models are behaving very similarly. Like they will try, like test the boundaries, test like how they can feel their body, how they can have an effect in that world. And I think in order to give them the feeling that they actually do have that, consistency helps a lot. And I think the aesthetic is a bit a result of supporting that agency of the person being inside. So I think my work is not a super kind of fantasy, sci-fi, I don't know, pixel war, but it's also not like a photorealistic, like, yeah, kind of uncanny valley. So I think it's, yeah, like when we speak about affordances, is somewhere in between, like, I don't know, the thing I'm always so surprised by is how serious we take doors. It's like, you know, if they are like a wall, like we really believe in these architectural elements, and like it's people, everybody, like we all know how to space. Like, I mean, if you work with like, yeah, kind of the architectural vocabulary, you can guide people's behavior so strongly, surprisingly strongly, and I think if within that, like, yeah, you create your rules and it continues to work in that way, yeah, I'm always amazed again on how, I mean, this really shows how effective architectural design can be. Yeah.
Well, let's probably call the session. Let's actually now maybe close it, just give a little warm of applause for, a round of applause for Paula. We have a little Design Plus Plus goodie bag gift for you.
Thank you.
So before we move on, so thank you again, Paula, but before we move on to the apero, please do not forget, next week is our last session for the seminar series, the Design Plus Plus seminar series, and the talk will be by Dr. Anton Savov. And if you missed any of the previous talks, just go on our YouTube page and you can just watch all of them online. Well, thank you and enjoy the apero.
Thank you.